Every publisher wants to prove their value, but very few actually know how a CMO evaluates them. What really drives media investment decisions, and what are publishers doing that's helping or hurting without, even realizing it? I'm James Deaker. I'm the Yield Doctor, and today we're going to be answering those questions with Lauren Weinberg. Lauren and I first crossed paths when she was a marketing executive at Yahoo. She has since gone on to greater things, including being the CMO at Square and later at Peloton. She is the co-author of the book Self-Made Boss. Lauren, I am so pleased that we have the chance to sit down and talk today.
Thank you so much for having me, James. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise. You have been a CMO at some of the world's most recognizable brands. When you were deciding where to put your marketing dollars, what were the first things that you looked for in a media partner or a publisher?
So there's a couple of things. I would say we usually start by thinking about the audience fit, depending on the moment for the brand or what kind of campaign it is, cultural relevancy, reach, their measurement capabilities. But I would say usually for planning, the first step often starts with your MMM model and really understanding your channel mix. And then once you know your strategy, you can get a better sense of what kind of buy you want to do. So just to give an example, at Peloton, our biggest season is during the holiday. Last year, our focus was on men. And so if you think about that time of year, men leading into Christmas time, we knew that we were going to have a big live sports buy. And a lot of that then really dictates what are the media channels that we choose to complement that type of buy. But at Square, for example, our Q4 was the slowest period because that was the period where business owners are the least likely to make a change to their solution. And so we would spend very little during that time. So it's really a combination of those factors, but it does start with audience fit, reach, measurement capabilities, and cultural relevance.
All right, that's a lot of stuff. So let me be more tactical. What were the key metrics that really mattered when you were evaluating publisher performance? And how did that differ between brand and performance campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, performance is always going to be about efficiency. And are you getting the most effective buy? And everywhere that I have been a CMO, there's just a huge amount of focus on optimizing your CAC. And so that is the most important thing, I would say, when it comes to thinking about performance. And so some of that, again, you're going to use the tools that you have. You're going to look at historical campaigns to help you understand what you think you'll be getting. And then we keep a really close eye on how we're trending because these are all marketplaces. And so when things start to really trend up or trend down, we'll optimize our media mix on the performance side based on what we're seeing. And then on the upper funnel brand side, it's a totally different set of metrics. So there, I would say we're really prioritizing quality reach, meaning are people engaged in the content? Is it going to be a good fit for us in terms of our brand? We want to get people in these very leaned in, engaged kind of moments. And if we serve up a piece of content and ad that's equally engaging, we're hoping that that's when we'll really start to see people engage with our brand. But when we think about the metrics there, very different set of metrics. And so there we want to make sure that we're reaching people. We want to make sure that we're reaching people the right frequency. This becomes a little tricky, I would say, when you get to the digital side of the house, because a lot of platforms will have you optimize for reach or frequency. If you optimize for reach, you're getting a really broad reach, but maybe a frequency that's way too low for your message to really resonate. And then other times, if you want to get a certain frequency, your reach is then a little too small. So it's definitely tricky to balance out those things, but those are the ways that we're thinking about the publishers that we're partnering with. And in post-campaign or mid-campaign, we'll look at leading indicators. So once we start running upper funnel media, which we really think of as a demand creation tactic, do we see more people coming to the site? Do we see more people searching for the brand? Do we start to see better efficiency in our lower funnel performance? media? And then do we see shifts in perception, shifts in awareness that could be based on our own tracking or what publishing partners offer to us?
Okay, so getting even more tactical, when you are reviewing performance with your team, what sort of measurement or metric would you look at that would actually change the budget allocation from one product to another or from one channel to another? And could you give an example of sort of a metric or an insight that led to a shift in the spend?
A shift in spend during the flight or after?
I would say both.
Okay.
I mean, I assume if you're in flight, it would have to be something egregious that would cause you to change spend. Presumably, if you've completed a flight and you're getting ready for the next one, it
Yeah.
might be more nuanced. But however you want to answer the question.
I'll answer it in both ways. So during the flight, I think the things that would cause us to shift spend is if we start to see, for example, CPMs or acquisition costs skyrocketing in one particular channel, then that may be, or if we look at the engagement or response rate to an ad and see that it's really off par with what we would typically see, that may give us reason to then shift money into other channels. But those are the kinds of things that you'd be looking at during mid-flight. So it's really engagement and some type of efficiency metric. And usually, it takes time to ramp. It takes time for these platforms to train their algorithms. So you have to give it some amount of time. But if you start to see any outliers, then it's either changing that or sometimes it's the creative within the same platform that needs to get swapped out. So we often will run multiple creative assets against the same partner and then find the winner within the first few weeks of a campaign and start to put more weight towards that one. Post-campaign, it really, I would say, is often MMM and really a triangulation of many different things. I'm sure, as you know, and probably as other people will say that come onto your podcast, there's no perfect marketing measurement. At Square, we were triangulating MMM, MTA, and incremental experiments that we were running across platform partners. And so it really does require you to look at all of those things. And then MMM, I think, post-campaign is probably the best way to really understand if you have a channel that has either room to scale or is way over in terms of the marginal ROI that you see. And so that often becomes the biggest indicator or reason why we would move money from channels in the next campaign flight.
So you are the first true demand person I've had on this podcast. Most people are publisher side, and so I want to check a couple of acronyms with you.
Okay.
MMM, media mix modeling.
Yes.
MTA.
Multi-touch attribution.
Brilliant. And so staying on metrics, again, publishers approach this from the things that are in their control. They control impressions. To some extent, they control things like viewability and CPMs, the prices that they charge. I'm guessing from the CMO's perspective, these aren't the same metrics. From your perspective on those publisher type metrics, which actually moves the needle? Which do you even care about, and which are table stakes?
Most of the things that you mentioned are table stakes, I would say. So obviously, and it's interesting, and I don't think that this is a very popular opinion, but I don't consider impressions to be an outcome metric. Some people do. To me, that just means that you're delivering what you said you would as a publisher. And if not, then I would expect that there's some type of make good there. And so to me, that's not an outcome. That's just a way to make sure that you were getting what you thought you were getting. So, and also you can have a lot of very poor quality impressions. So impressions to me are not really a metric of success. Viewability, obviously really important. And I think that one is a little bit more of a metric that you would look at to make sure that obviously you want to eliminate waste as a marketer, and making sure that people at least have the opportunity to see your ad is an important way to ensure that you're not wasting your money. But I would say it usually is not the metrics that come from the publishers that marketers end up using. And most of what you get from a publisher is very much what they can see within their own world. And I think, as you know, the world is increasingly more siloed, more walled gardens. And that just makes it even harder for marketers to really look across an entire campaign and have a good sense of how their campaigns are performing. But that being said, I do think that good publishing partners will really help make sure that you're optimizing your campaigns well and point things out to you that you maybe haven't even noticed, just to help you maximize the impact of your buy.
So extrapolating on that point, what is it that publishers are trying to do that CMOs care about? Or the flip side, where's the biggest disconnect between things that publishers think are important and CMOs actually don't care about?
So my sense is that most publishers have a good sense of what's important. Is that always aligned with their business objectives or how they want to conduct their business? I think that's where there sometimes is some friction. Generally speaking, I think most of the really large publishers today do a very good job of having good dialogue with CMOs and having really important counsels that help guide their ad product roadmap. It's just that sometimes there's not alignment between what the advertising community wants and maybe what's the most important thing for a publisher, or publishers are contending with other privacy challenges that just make it harder for marketers to get exactly what they want to get from a publishing partner. So I don't see it as they don't get it, they don't know what we want. I think it's more of, I do actually believe that most publishers understand what marketers want, and sometimes they're building roadmaps to get there. If you're talking about publishers that are newer in the ad space, sometimes their platforms are just not sophisticated enough yet, but they often know what they need to build and they're in the process of building it. Or other times, I think there's other competing priorities that exist on their businesses.
Many publishers like to think of themselves as being, in some sense, premium or differentiated. I know more than 10 years ago, when you and I were both at Yahoo, there was always discussions about the kind of premium experience that they wanted to create, and I probably sat in far too many meetings on that subject. Do CMOs even care about whether a publisher brand is so-called premium or differentiated? Or are they just looking for other things, like so long as it's a clean experience, well measured, etc.?
I think this depends on whether you're talking about lower funnel performance media or more upper funnel brand building campaigns. And to me, it's less about, is the publisher premium or are there premium placements within the publisher? And I do think there are premium placements within the publisher that marketers are willing to pay more for, because it's the places where they see the most engagement with their audiences, or potentially where there's just the most reach. And in my opinion, as long as we have the right creative to execute on those premium placements, those usually tend to be worth the added expense.
Interesting. I want to stay on this because I've been an advocate for a long time that you have to have standard ad units and standard creatives. There has been, from time to time, different companies that have taken a run at trying to create different ad experiences. If I go way back to the NTV Viacom days 15 years ago, they didn't even run IAB standard ads. And I've since worked with some publishers who have taken that same position, that we're going to be unique and different. As a CMO, how big a barrier is it to you to create creative and ad sizes specifically for whether it's a website, an app, or even a sort of CTV experience? I've always assumed that it's a pretty big barrier, but actually, I don't think you and I have ever talked about this, and I'd love your take.
It's only a big barrier if you're not planning for it from the beginning. So, oftentimes there could be over 1,000 different creative deliverables for any one campaign, given all of the sizes, different messaging, different audience targets. And so last minute additions to your list of deliverables become extremely painful. if you know going into your campaign planning and and some of these things I would say actually just need to be shot from very specific angles. If you're talking about video, that's very hard to then at the last minute conjure up a brand new asset. And it's the kind of thing that your creative team will want to kill your brand marketing team over. And so knowing what those bespoke placements are, being aware of them when you go in to do your shots is the only way to do that in a way that is not really painful. And when you do that, as long as you know it's coming, it's not a problem, in my opinion. It's the surprises that make that having any type of unique or bespoke unit challenging.
Was there ever a pitch from a publisher that really stood out to you in a good way? And if so, what did that publisher do that set them apart?
So I think one that comes to mind is, and I'm going to go back to Peloton, but last year we do a lot of work with Amazon. We sell our products. Peloton sells products on Amazon. And last year, I think I mentioned earlier, Peloton was really trying to bring more men into their ecosystem. And so I thought Twitch did a really nice job of coming to us with something that was really novel and compelling. So last year, Twitch created a new game called The Glitch, which was a branded game, and they allowed Peloton to be part of their game. We got some really high impact placements on Twitch, and they also offered us the ability to show up in real life at TwitchCon. And so it was a really full 360 moment for us to talk to an audience that was pretty new for us at the time. And I think the result is that we saw, and it was very interesting at the time because there was some controversy with safety and Twitch, and a lot of people, including myself, were getting bombarded with emails around why we should take our ads down on Twitch. And we decided to stay the course because we were doing something new and we wanted to understand what the efficacy would look like. And essentially, we saw a 25% lift in unaided awareness against an audience that we were really trying to reach and to show them that we had something that was new and different for them. So to me, that was just a good example of them understanding what we were trying to achieve and coming to us with a solution that was unique and really allowed us to talk to their audience in a couple different places and in a few different ways that I think showed that as a brand, we understood the Twitch audience. And I think that's what resonates really well with consumers when you are putting content into a publishing platform environment that feels native to that environment and that it really belongs there. So that's, I think, an example of a really great pitch from a publishing partner.
In all of our conversations so far, you've talked about performance, but you've never really talked about the price of the assets. And as you know from the world I was in, that was every day all I was ever thinking about. How much do CMOs really care about things like the CPM of the unit, or do they only care whether it's going to back into the performance metrics that they need on the back end?
I wouldn't say that we only care about how it backs in. I think that I definitely care about the CPM, and there are moments where your competitors are really flooding the marketplace and just causing tremendous price inflation. And in those moments, we'll want to pull back a little bit because then we just know that we could be tipping over to a point where our media is no longer efficient. I'll just say, as a CMO at multiple companies, that you are constantly getting pressure from your CFO on the efficiency and efficacy of your media. And when you want to create demand ahead of a promotion or a capture moment, then you actually know that your media will be a little bit more inefficient going into that period of time. And so, yes, I care a lot about all of the efficiency metrics, including the cost of media. But at the end of the day, just straight up CPMs are not as important to me as understanding, is the ROI going to be there? Can I afford to pay this much to acquire a customer based off of what I'm going to get back if I bring that customer in?
Because you said CFO and you said ROI, I have to ask we're in a world where, at least in the last couple of years, this idea of sort of incremental ROI, and there's sort of this all sorts of different acronyms to think about efficiency. When you're looking at it, how do you think about ROI or incremental ROI?
So what I have found is that marketing tends to really be ahead of the pack when it comes to thinking about incremental return on investment. And so everything that we tend to look at on the marketing side is very much incremental, but none of the other places in the business have the ability to really understand the incremental lift. And so it's interesting. It's the right way to look at it. But then if you're the only channel, marketing is the only channel that's looking at it in that way, then it's often a disadvantage inside the company because other things may look more efficient. So I would say if you can get everybody to be looking at the incremental return, that's 100% the right way to do it. It's really hard to do that. Some channels are harder than others. And so we tend to, on the marketing side, make our decisions. When we look at MMM, everything in there is very much based on incremental ROI, and that's how we'll make our decisions. If that answers your question.
It does, and thank you. I mean, I think it's a little known secret that I only do these so that I can learn from all the guests that I have on, and you're certainly helping me with that. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time today. What is the best way for people to follow all of the amazing things that you are doing?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, James. And it's been really fun to reconnect with you after not having seen you for probably a decade. So thanks for having me. The best way to find me is probably on LinkedIn. You can follow me there, hashtag Lauren Weinberg 13. That's usually where I talk about the things that I'm thinking about. So I look forward to connecting with people there.
Excellent. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, James. You too.